Welcome to The Lift, an initiative by the Architects Alliance, where we elevate your understanding of built environment issues, one floor at a time. This is our episode 4, and I am your host, Architect Irene Agoto.
Welcome all to The Lift. My name is Arthur Adair, and today I'll be speaking as an architect. I have my other background is in landscape architecture, and I also lecture. But today it will be primarily speaking as an architect from an architect's perspective. So I apologize early on to my friends in landscape architecture, my friends in public space advocacy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Arthur. I like the fact that you're very deliberately distancing yourself from the practice. And yes, and that brings us to the question, the very pertinent question about planning and architects. There has been a lot of discussion on planning issues. I think it's been probably the discussion at most dinner tables, in most forums for the past few months, because technically, I mean, let's face it, we have a planning quagmire in the city of Nairobi. I'll start with the city of Nairobi, but the reality is that it's seeping out onto the other cities as well and to the other counties. But within the city of Nairobi, actually, I will start by getting your opinion, because your opinion is always very interesting on this matter. Where do you think we are in terms of planning in Nairobi?
As architects or?
As Arthur Adair.
As Arthur Adair, as Nairobi. I mean, that's a fascinating question. I think maybe in previous conversations, you've had certain things that I've said. And I've always asked, what is better? A bad plan, well executed, or no plan at all? And my notion is that if you have a bad plan, well executed, absolutely 100%, it's bad. If you have no plan, then there are chances that you might have something working. Now,
you mean hit or miss?
Yes. The question of Nairobi and planning in Nairobi is we have a mixture of a bad plan that really commenced what we know Nairobi as, which is the 1948 master plan for our colonial capital.
Yes.
Whether like it or not, it was a bad plan. Many people speak of it as being the last good plan, but no. So that was the base, which was a bad plan.
And why do you say it's a bad plan?
I'll get to that. And then thereafter, at a certain point, you know now that we are operating with no plan.
Yes.
And so to the question of where are we with planning in Nairobi is, it's not clear. Now, your query about why was that a bad plan?
Yes.
That plan was developed by, I think, Professor L. White. If I understand right, yes, was the chair of the University of Cape Town. And it was based on segregation. There are nice things that are said in it, self-contained neighborhoods, proper zoning, but ultimately it was a containment plan. It was not a growth plan. It was about containing certain people into certain quarters so that they only provide labor when they're allowed to, and then allowing the others to fully enjoy what they would refer to. I don't know if the reference Green City at the Sun came at that point, but
it may have. It may have,
yes.
Because things were better then.
Yes. So for them.
Yes.
Yes. So ultimately, if we think about it, and if you try and extrapolate that plan, it was a bad plan. Self-containing various races in various places.
Mm-hmm.
It's not really a growth strategy. Yeah. And I think maybe I'll reference, I think I listened to a long-term planner in Nairobi, Tom Odongo, in an episode of Spice FM. And he articulated that very well. He said that one of the challenges is that we had a containment plan and we've never really had a growth plan for the city.
So in this containment plan, I would like to just, take you back a little. Professor L. White, what was his background, his profession?
Yeah, I'm not wrong. He was an architect. Huh? At least I know he was the chair of the architect department. I don't know too much further.
So that means it's possible that he was an architect. I mean, that we can research a little bit
quite
further.
Possible he was an architect. And when you think about it and extrapolate it further, planning as a profession, as a formal and recognized profession, if I'm not wrong, really took off around the 1920s. There are various other things that were cropping up long before that. I think the first degree program was maybe in the early 1900s. I'm quite clear about that, but close. So if we say really the 1920s, planning is really becoming strong as a profession, this is 28 years later.
Whereby we're referring, the reference point is now 1948.
Yes, 1948.
So with 1948 being the reference plan, and then we have this Professor L. White, the Cape Townian, who came here and gave us a plan of containment. Assuming he was an architect, and actually we shall get to the bottom of that. Are we then saying that our problems began with an architect?
I should have seen where you were going with that.
No. I'm just asking. I'm going nowhere. I'm right here.
I don't think I want to say our problems began with an architect, because, as I've said, there are things within that plan that look and sound good.
Yes.
The ultimate problem is the overall vision behind it. And so, indeed, at that point, because, and I'll be corrected if I was wrong, because he was chair of a department of architecture, our problems did begin with an architect.
Yes, so be it. Yeah. Now, having said that, and the mess that we are, this miasma of what can we call it? I don't even know how to define it anymore, where we are in Nairobi right now. There's been a lot of blame game amongst the professions. Planners throwing the blame this way, everywhere. And the architect has principally been quite silent in this discussion. Despite, of course, aspersions being cast. Now, the reality is this. When it comes to the built environment, to the pyramid of the built environment, traditionally and actually, the architect sits at the apex. The reason being, the architect is a vision bearer. You spoke about L. White's vision. The architect really is a vision bearer. For a building to come up, the vision, somebody must have had a vision.
Yeah.
And it's usually the architect who executes it, right? And when you look at it, even in terms of training, the rest, in comparison to the rest of the built environment, we traditionally, I'm not sure if it's happening still, but when it came to making a choice of who goes to the School of Architecture, the system picked the best students. The creme de la creme, for lack of a better word, I'll just call it that for what it is. Then we spent the longest time in university, in our training. And then once you get out there, the apprentice, as an apprentice, you take an even longer time before you actually become an architect. So our training is unquestionable. And in that same reel of things, we have some level of exposure to each and every sector of the built environment. We go through the theory of structures, which is an engineer's domain. We go through planning. We do master plans for our, city planning and that kind of thing. We do costing to some level. This is during training. To some level, that's the QS's domain. And so on and so forth. So really, we are the most qualified out of the built environment. I'm just giving a quick overview of where we are as architects. Now, with that in mind, and with the planning mess that's going on in Nairobi, what has been our role?
Wow, there's a lot to unpack there. Maybe there are a few things that I would want to push back on.
Oh, please.
First, the system did not choose the best. The notion of supply and demand meant that because architecture was seen as a profession where you should be able to make a little buck very quickly, and because it was a very small classes, by the time we were going, our classes were 25, and maybe
graduating classes were
and
10,
JK
11.
UAT just started,
Yes.
and another 20.
But what do you mean? I'll take you back.
Maximum 40.
What do you mean by making a quick back?
Not a quick back. It was looked at as a sort of profession where
so it seemed.
Where you should get wealthy.
Okay.
And I think indeed there was a lot of wealth early on because there were very few architects,
Yes.
and it was a growing nation. And so there was a lot of work for those very few architects. So because they're choosing 25, and you look and say, this is something that should put me in good stead, it's naturally going to be very few, and really the topmost students at that point would that get into architecture. And it was. In fact, I have some problems with that because I feel there are some people who absolutely brilliant minds who would have been better off in economics. And
why economics? Why not mathematics?
Even mathematics, but economics drives the world, man. And so some of those brilliant minds would have been better served being there. Now, the truth, though, and I do agree with you, the training in architecture is very rigorous.
Yes.
And it's very broad and deep at the same time, which is quite a strange thing, which is why they end up keeping us there for 6 years.
Unnecessarily long.
I think 5 is comfortable. And you're right, you then double in several different things. The trouble that happened is, and this is really a philosophical and theoretical point that's important to make, is that we began to misunderstand the true theory of architecture. And the theory is really described as the know why. Why are you doing things? And we focused a lot on the practice.
Right.
Practice is the know how. So do you know how to design a beautiful building? You kind of know. Do you know structures? You know all these things, and you know how you should do them. And I've been challenging a lot of architects. Have we really thought of why, so that we can drive theory and new theory and not just borrow theory? And what that then meant is that, to your question on planning,
yes,
is that what was left is these very brilliant people who understand very many things, just speaking on the side as to how everybody is missing the point.
Mm-hmm.
And they can kind of see it, but because they have said, this is our profession and this is how we do it, there's no opportunity to break up that profession. And
what do you mean by no opportunity to break up that profession?
Okay, maybe I should not say no opportunity. We've missed the opportunity to break up the profession.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe I'll check with my colleagues in the universities, but have we broadened the planning issues and the planning discussions and the planning subjects and courses and thoughts in the architectural training? Have we broadened it to the point where people are thinking about it truly philosophically, to begin to understand how we are missing and jumping?
So am I hearing that the training is still silotic? It's still very, segregated? Have we not reached the level of actualization where we are broad-based in the way we disseminate the knowledge that we have? I'm trying to break it down without being too technical.
Yes. I want to say, and I'm not talking about it being siloed. I want to say that we are afraid of our own brilliance. And because we understand a number of different things, we're like, I will not delve into that too much.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, sometimes you might say it's maybe a little bit beneath me, but I will be able to tell people that they don't know what they're doing. So when I'm talking about broadening that conversation. So when we did planning, we did not do planning from the basis of a strong architectural theoretical position.
Yes, true.
We did it from here is an introduction to planning.
To planning, yes.
And these are some of the things you will then need to attend to. And planning is an incredibly complex. Everybody uses the word planning anyway.
Yes, it's
whatever
very broad.
you're doing,
it's
broad, it's
and
very broad. Now you break it down into physical planning, it even gets
physical planning, urban planning.
There's still
town
so
planning,
much
infrastructure
even within
planning,
that. And when planners go out to engage in any of those tasks, they necessarily have to have so many different experts coming in. And the question then I would ask architects is, within that space of architecture and planning, how much have they broadened the theoretical basis for the planners to use?
Yes.
So if we look at Nairobi, for example, I was asking myself, and maybe you can help me with this. When we were studying, we always knew that in CBD, you are allowed to build up to the property line.
Yes,
and in fact, they
line,
required
to
you
beacon,
to build to the edge of the street, and you're
Mhm.
allowed to put a canopy at this height. And I asked myself, I can't remember actually reading a document for that.
It's actually in the code.
It's in the code. That's
in the
what I'm saying.
1968
It's
code.
in the 1968 code.
Yes.
I know it's there. So when you go look at the code, you begin to find it. But most of us just know.
Yes, actually. It's knowledge. It's just the same way you know that this is a pair of socks.
Yes.
You put it on your foot.
Exactly. Now, did we ever ask why they wanted us to build to the edge of the property line?
I don't remember ever asking.
Did they ask why that
it was
canopy?
Rules that you walked into.
You walked into and you accepted. Why the canopy? And the canopy was very distinct. Why is it only in the CBD? So as the pressures of growth began to take over and the things you're speaking about began to happen,
yes.
Did they happen with the strengthening of the urban design code, which architects should have been speaking to? Or should architects be complaining there's no planning? Say, when architects say there's no planning, you then ask them, hold on.
Who is responsible for this?
Yes, what should you be actually?
What's your part in this?
What's your part in this? So right now, look, Kilimani, major problems. And by the Kilimani is a small problem. You know that. I always say that. There are other bigger,
massive problem.
There are other bigger problems, and they happened and they moved on. But Kilimani now is...
Having said that, even before we now crystallize down to Kilimani, because, we need to be a little bit historical.
Yeah.
And I'll of course, cap my history at a certain time, where we began to see the manifestation, visible manifestation, so to speak, of chaos continues to be actually a place called Pipeline. That is usually the reference point of chaos.
Yes.
Now, when Pipeline started happening, architects sat and watched. You and I, we sat and watched.
I wasn't around, but okay.
We sat and watched, wherever you are, wherever you are in the world, we all sat and watched, and we have to take responsibility
and
for
we
that.
Sneered.
But why is it that happened? And we could have spoken up.
So that's very true, and Pipeline was perhaps the biggest exemplar because it suddenly took what was happening in other places. I reference any place with 50 by 100s and all that.
Yes.
Yeah? It suddenly took that and put it on steroids.
Yes.
In close proximity to major, or rather old, low density housing estates. And so it suddenly came to the forefront of everybody's attention. And I am always very careful to remind people and say, people live in pipeline.
Yes.
So we need to be very conscious and respectful of that thought, and then ask, why would people live in pipeline? And the truth of the matter is, now we are discussing lots of other urban economic issues. We are discussing going back to those whole containment policies, but we are also discussing democratization, which is a beautiful thing that happened. But you see, once we have this process of greater liberty, it then means that the freedom of movement and all that becomes more, and it's easier for people. Let me not say easier. The economic drivers become stronger if you don't attend to them. So in a command economy or a dictatorship, or the previous systems that we were under, you could be thrown into jail for doing some of those things.
Absolutely,
and a few
because
people
some
are
of them are criminal.
controlling. Yes, a few people are controlling the purse strings. Now, of course, we've democratized the purse strings and all that, but in this process where there are a few more liberties, which is a good thing, you then have certain people taking way more liberties. Now, as architects, we needed to have anticipated that and said, guys, at the very least, do this way. At the very least.
In your opinion, do you think
can't do this?
Yes. Do you think that the pipeline, as it is in its shape and form right now, do you think or do you believe that there's what was involvement of architects in the process?
Yeah, the architects there for certain. There must be architects. But they are
is
not.
that an assumption?
It's an assumption, no,
Yes.
but I'm sure many architects might not say I did that job in pipeline, but it's
because
an
the other
involvement.
way it could be that maybe there was initially an architect who designed a layout without any consideration of or maybe because the first thing we usually do when you begin to do a design, you have the site plan. So at the time, maybe there was nothing around the site, his allocated site, his or her allocated site. So probably there was, and this is an assumption, an architect who did an initial layout, and then it became a cookie cutter. Because the truth is that all those developments have a semblance of similarity.
That is true. And that's what I'm saying. So architectural involvement was definitely there. And even after that, even later, I'm sure there are some architects who have participated there.
So now, can we call it irresponsible architecture?
I wouldn't quite call it that. And the reason I wouldn't quite call it that, and this goes to our missing of our planning role, is that how do we then understand, how do you push boundaries? Because you yourself, we said it, there was this land knowledge of the 1968 code that we knew and never questioned. So if we are saying that, hold on, this 1968 code can't work, and we need to push the envelope for progress and innovation, how do we do it? And so the sad thing about it is that whoever did the first one did not fully comprehend how best to push that envelope. So every other copy just became worse. Yeah. And maybe this is a question to you. I know you're the moderator, but I know you're also an architect. When we think about it, what was the tallest building or the densest building we did in our 6 years?
On our own drawing tables?
No.
Or
in class, in studio,
we never went past the 4th floor.
So the MUD, the
MUD.
And you must give Bully Ladu a lot of credit. He used to actually try and force us to do projects in complicated places.
Right.
And begin to think about these things.
Yes, because if I remember my MUD,
it was down near Accra or something.
Yes, Accra Road.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Mine was maybe 5 floors.
Okay.
Yeah.
I believe mine was 4.
Yes. 5 or 4
Because
floors.
that's what we knew then.
That's what we knew then.
Mm-hmm.
And so the responsible architects, when there was suddenly this challenge of pushing the envelope, not the design envelope, but the code envelope,
Mm-hmm.
basically they looked and the ethical architect says, this is the code, we can't do anything, and they left. So the unethical architect
Mm-hmm.
jumped in, and I hope I'm not accusing anybody, I don't know anyone who has that, but I'm assuming they jumped in, and because they're already unethical, they didn't think deeply
Mm-hmm.
about how do I break this code? What do I demand of this code? And so what emerged was that mess. Actually, one of the things I haven't told you, I have a collection somewhere of 50 by 100 plans.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking
which you were of selling them.
No, not selling. I was collecting to study and see what the problems are. And I was saying, I think the 50 by 100, I don't write as much as I should, and I threw it in some social media post at some point.
Yes.
Should be studied more intensely in architecture school.
Absolutely, because
so that
it is what is happening.
What typologies can emerge that would create a good code.
Yes.
Yeah. Because right now, there is no code that knows how to deal with that mess.
Yes.
So that code that we were speaking about, there are things in Plupa, but they don't deal with those things. They deal with setbacks. Yeah. It doesn't deal.
That's way leaves.
Leaves. Yeah. It deals with just these densities. But every plan eventually has an outcome.
Absolutely.
And to what you're saying, while we are at the apex of the built environment, we have allowed ourselves to come at the end, because that plan emerges, and then you're finally told this is what happens here.
Yes, this is what happens here.
This is this. And then you get your plot and say, this is what I'm allowed to do in the plot. Say, hold on. Why weren't we more involved in saying, okay, if this is the plot, this is how it
should happen.
This is what should happen in the plot. I understand where you're trying to go to from all the other issues and all the other factors. But this is what should happen. Because ultimately, and this is going to sound crazy, the building is just a frame for the most important thing, which is the public space, and which is the space, and which is the environment, and which is where your infrastructure passes, which is where people need to move through, which is where
buildings breathe.
Yes, which is where you have your water, which is where people meet and gather. If we do not think about those things, we are serving everybody else.
But
yes,
but the human being, the end user. Now,
yes,
that brings me
we are serving all the other professions.
Yes,
fairly. We keep telling them, you guys don't know what you're doing, but we've not truly gone back into all those things.
Yes,
and so what I'm actually calling for is an expanded training,
a broader spectrum on the basis of training,
and for everybody. So remember, you started off by saying, why am I denying the architects a bit? I teach landscape architecture.
Yes.
I don't teach architecture.
Okay.
And my colleagues, forgive me, but they know I've said this. I would cringe when they ask a student, where's the landscape architecture? You're going to architecture. And I'm like, no. Allow them to explore all this. Landscape architecture is not what is left over after you do architecture. In fact, in many ways, it comes first. So allow them to
because
think
ideally
through.
We should be building around green spaces, not the other way around. Not building green spaces around buildings.
Yeah, and then I say, why is this landscape okay? This one I've not pushed enough to my architecture friends. Why is that landscape a single unit in architecture? And why haven't we truly expanded So that architects begin to understand, hold on, these things are all very complex.
Yes.
We've not even gotten
But
into...
at the end of the day, they're related.
Yes, we've not even gotten into engineers who are also struggling from a deep... and I have to be very careful about this because I could get into trouble.
Because they will come for you.
I'm speaking about a lot about the Kenyan context.
Yes.
Who are very clear about what they want to do. Brilliant people. So if you tell them get this much water out of here, they will get that much water out of here in the most efficient purpose.
Absolutely.
But that place is also a place where children are playing. Is also a place where people need to meet and gather. Is also a place where you want to... I mean, it's also a place where you want people to move through, cycle,
yes.
vehicles, people to sell. So it's not just about the engineering. And I know they'll tell us, hey, guys, you guys decide, we'll sort it out for you.
Yes.
But I'm saying, no, let everybody expand their field just a bit.
Yes.
And this is where architects can lead that conversation. And I would say pull, not push. Pull that conversation to get guys to understand, if we don't think about this thing collectively, we all fail. If we think about it collectively, there's so much for everybody.
Yes.
We also had a scarcity mentality. You said this is not just about Nairobi. All the other towns are growing and growing very fast. How will they grow if this is not expanded?
So when we speak about growth, and of course the reference point, when we the short discussion we had about pipeline, it's all about plot sizes. It's very increasingly becoming the reference point. Now, with this issue of densification, which is what we are facing, and I will come to your opinion on densification, but before that, there is always this broad-based paintbrush that is used to justify the densification, that population is growing. By 2050, we will have 10 million people in Nairobi, and there's no land. Is that a reality?
Let's put it this way. I love nuance. And the trouble with all this densification talk is it's kind of black and white from one side. On one side, you have, you don't just utter that building should be 30 floors. Because that's not densification.
Yes.
At the same time, we shouldn't say there's plenty of land. Because it's also true. We don't have plenty of land. So this conversation must happen somewhere in the middle. And this goes back to that bad plan, that containment plan, the 1948
Professor
plan.
L. White.
Yes, which was not thinking about growth. And sorry, I'm jumping here a bit because I want to get to something about planning that's very key, because it goes to the heart of this question. So most of our conversations around planning seem to be about the building and in fact, very many of them about the building and what can be done in this building and all that. But that's, as I've said, that's the end. That's the last bit. And okay, I'll be fair to people. There's a lot of conversations about roads, about infrastructure
in general.
Yes. But a lot of it is related to the building. And it's true. Buildings are what we see, and they are evocative. And so one of the things that happened, was lucky I was in Singapore in about 2017 or 2018. And I went to the City Council Museum. I think they have an urban and planning museum. Think about that,
Yes.
And it's interesting when all these guys go benchmark.
Which means that they are very, very deliberate in archiving and documenting.
Yes, and that's where
urban planning issues.
Yes, and that's where people see all their model of the. They have the full island
cities.
model, and they have the model of this basic CBD. Yeah, and I mean, I'm well versed in architecture and certain planning issues, but I went to the museum And there was a short video that introduced as you walk in. And of course, this video is designed for everybody to understand. And what I remember in the video is they said, it started off with something like saying, we need land for everything we do.
Yes.
Whatever we want to do, we need land. Yes. Right now, we are doing a podcast in a building that needed land. And then they went on, which is a reality for Singapore, and said, but land is a finite resource.
Yes.
We don't have enough of it. So we must share it and share it well.
Yes.
Very simple point. I was like, that's the first point.
Yes.
In planning.
Efficiency in sharing land.
That word sharing. Yeah. The next thing they said is that one of the core principles of their plan is that everybody will live within 400 meters of a public park.
Okay.
So
was that enshrined in the law? Was that?
It's in their plan.
It's in their plan.
And one of the things, because
in their laws of planning.
In their plan. And because they're discussing their plan at that point. I can't remember for which year to which year. But it's their master plan for Singapore at that point, which they're discussing and saying these are the core principles. So it's like the overall premise is that land must be shared.
Yes.
Then really one of the core principles that jumped out to me, it might have been first or second, is that everybody will live within a public park. Now, I'm not sure if that came from them first or I've subsequently seen UN Habitat. I'm sure I've seen some documents where they prescribe that as a good thing. I don't know where it came from, but I first saw it in Singapore.
Right.
And I thought, wow, this is so powerful. That is a very simple, measurable metric.
Yes.
About planning. So if pipeline was happening, the question would be draw 400 meters.
And then
outside of that perimeter
find out where you can.
Do people have a park? So you say, hey, hold on, how are you doing this? Yeah. And so really the notion around planning is, I know this is going to sound like I'm contradicting myself, is we both must demystify it. It's not a very complex thing in terms of the actual work.
Yes.
It's complex in terms of the politics that surround that notion of sharing.
Of sharing, yes.
And indeed, politics is not a bad word. It's a real word. Once you have 1 million people and they must share, there's going to be some political issues. So how do you understand how to navigate that? And I apologize, I might have lost my train of thought, but...
You will find it.
Yes, but what I'm then coming back to, even as we begin to think about this densification, and the question was, is this dense or is this not dense? Is there enough land or isn't there enough land? We should be able to spill out 4 or 5 core principles very, very simply. So that before you talk about 30 floors, those 4 or 5 principles
have been met.
Before you say there's enough land, those 4 or 5 principles have been met. So I'll push you. I was thinking about this the other day. I know a lot of people speak about the new plan.
Yes.
Because that's the thing we know the best.
Yeah. And that's the thing which at the altar of planning.
Yeah,
that's the most recent discussion.
We are told there's a new plan.
There's a new plan.
There's the new plan.
Yes.
We're told there's the new plan. Can we say the 5 principles that the new plan?
What, in your opinion, would be the principles that the new plan?
What I'm asking you now, do you know the 5
principles? If I was to unpack it.
No. Not to unpack it. Do you know? What I mean is, you see...
Or the very same way we were very conversant with the code. It was almost our Bible.
And also what I'm telling you, when I went to that museum in Singapore for urban planning, they could distill their master plan into a short video that a 7-year-old, I was going to say 5, even the 5 will understand some things. In fact, the graphics were all
very,
for 5-year-olds.
very, very clear. Yes.
I've looked for it in YouTube. I've found some versions of it. And maybe I would urge people to look. Maybe they've done new ones. It was very clear. So if we have the new plan, it should say, here, everybody should be singing those things right now.
Could that be because the new plan was never implemented?
No, it's because, and in my opinion, there's a lot of good work inside the new plan.
Yes.
And I know there's a time I was going to speak somewhere, and you guys and other guys in the last told me, don't be too academic. Don't be too philosophical. The new plan is too dense.
It needs crystallization. It's too dense for pedestrian consumption.
Yes, and a plan cannot be, the implementation of that plan needs to be dense for the people who, but you should be able to distill
simplify
a plan like that into a very simple, cogent 4 or 5 messages.
Yes.
So if we came out of that new plan and said everybody must live within 400 meters of a public park, right now we would be crying. We would not be talking about 30 floors. We would be saying, hey, before you, where is this park?
Yes.
Before you say everybody should be. So some of these things come out in political manifestos and all that, and they get confused in what they are. You know, every child must have safe drinking water, blah, 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 safe. And if those things are very clear, and they're kind of there. Yeah, they're kind of there when you try and read the new plan. You'll see objectives very clearly.
Yes,
and that's what I'm saying is dry.
But true. Yeah. But the one principle upon which, and this is the principle of urban planning, the one principle that the new plan keeps on repeating itself on, it's almost repetitive, is the need for spatial planning in the form and shape of local area development plans, the LPDPs. That I can attest to because, in my opinion, where the rain started beating us is with the introduction of this change of use. The change of use principle is a very amorphous principle because when you ask yourself, what is the basis of a change of use? Why would it be necessary to have a change of use if we are very clear that this area, this is the local physical development plan? If this area can only have one school, it can have this number of residences, it can have a religious quarter, you know, the way, urbanized, very well organized cities do have. They have quarters, they have religious sections, they have entertainment centers, they have residential centers, they have, and then the mixed developments come in places where the coexistence has already been thought out so well that nobody comes in the way of the other. So the new plan harps on that quite a bit. What it doesn't do is crystallize it enough to give very clear local area development plans. What do you feel about that? And especially on this mess of change of use.
Wow. Yeah, change of use is because we had a bad plan. And then
or no plan.
And then we moved to no plan. So if you have no plan, you need to have change of use.
Yes.
And then it's done badly.
Yes.
Yeah. And apologies to my planner friends. They've done change of use for me. So we all understand that we are living in a mad society. But they
cannot be excused for some of those crimes. We are here to talk about ourselves.
Yes.
It's criminal.
And we need to push them. I want to believe every time we have pushed for a change of use, it's for a good reason. That notwithstanding. LPDPs. You see, this goes to what I'm saying about how do we demystify all these things? And you're not gonna go tell 7-year-old you need an LPDP.
Yeah.
you're going to show him or her,
Mhm.
show them something and say, here is what it is. And kids are they'll pick it up very quickly. In fact, I'm sure they'll look and say, hey, where are the playgrounds? Yeah, in fact.
And where can I ride my bike?
Where can I ride my bike? Yeah. Yeah, in fact, the day my son, who's 9, he doesn't know I'm saying this, was telling me, planning is a problem in this city. And
I'm glad it's come down
I didn't speak to it,
to
but
that
I
level.
said, okay,
Yeah.
what it means is that he's hearing many adults.
Yes.
They're hearing many adults repetitively
it.
saying planning is a problem.
Yes.
Now, let us counter that with a 9-year-old in, say, Singapore, who I can take to the museum and show them.
Yes.
In a way that they can understand. And what am I trying to say here? I'm trying to say we're also caught by overly complicating and then a certain fight over ownership over how these things should be done.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very clear, it's spelled out in Plupa exactly how an LPDP should be done.
Mm-hmm.
And if it doesn't get done that way, it then doesn't get done.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody's going to turn around and say, hey, there's a problem of implementation.
Yes.
And it would be lovely if we need to get Tom, but don't go here at some point to speak, because this goes to the trouble of our planning departments within the counties. And the notion that because initially there was the containment plan, and again, I'm speaking to things that were said in that very interesting conversation in Spice FM. The planners then suddenly moved and went largely into development control.
Yes.
And the question that we should be asking, which I know everybody is asking, is why isn't there this generation of LPDPs? Yeah. Why? What is it that, and I've used the word LPDPs, but now I'll break it down even further. What is it that stops from saying, okay, you've come for a change of views, you've come to ask for more density here, we are the planning department, even though this is the process that LPDP must be done with, why don't we just look at this area? Yeah. And
identify the needs
and see what that means.
Yes. Or what it should look like.
And what it should look like. And put that out there. And then let the very people who are very good with the politics, who can say 30 flaws, speak to that. Mm-hmm. So the planners will do it, and the politicians will then adopt and drive it and win support over it, because if it's logical, it will win support. So what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say, even at the very least, and I know there are different various groupings who try to do these things, but with all different bases. I have my little scribbles, which hopefully TA will publish soon.
Yes, your scribbles and your sketches.
Yes, try to show, hey, this is what might happen here. But what did it mean if I took this
and moved it like
400 meters of a place in Kilimani and said, okay, we need to rethink what happens here. We're going to do all these densities. It's we should be able to do that fairly quickly. However, there's going to be politics.
There's going to be
got to come in, because you're going to be dealing with not just the backlashes, but you're going to be dealing with property. Yeah, you're going to be dealing with public property, because to the notion of the bad plan, I'm struggling to understand a true public park outside of Arboretum, which is also fenced and people pay.
Yes, exactly. So it's no longer public.
True public park within this Kilimani Kilelasho area.
There isn't any, as a matter of fact. So Kilimani is no longer breathing.
But was there ever any?
What I
That
can
is the
say
question I
is
am
the
asking.
reason why there may not have been, Uhuru Park for the longest time was a walking park.
I forget Uhuru Park.
Yes.
Uhuru Park, in fact, is part of our problems because that's how we think of a park.
That's how we think of a park,
We
which you
think of
shouldn't.
this- Yes.
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 However, when I think about the evolution of Kilimani, which started off as a very low density, single dwelling unit, and homes were, some homes would sit on like up to 2 acres.
Yes.
So the place was breathing.
Yeah.
The place was breathing. It may not have been at the time, it probably was the best land use at the time.
Yeah.
But as things evolved, and now beacon to beacon construction has been introduced, the place is no longer breathing. But initially, actually, the problem came from the initial layout. There was no public park. And there was no public park identified.
And if you go east, Kaloleni, Shaurimoyo,
there were public parks there.
Why?
Because of I don't know.
That's where the black people
that's
were.
That's where the black
people
the
Africans were.
Yeah, that's where the Africans were.
So give them space to entertain themselves. Then the rest of us, keep them there. The rest of us on this end, we will live in big properties
where we will not have
where we cannot put a public park because then they will come.
True.
So suddenly you find there are a lot of private members clubs, but not very many public parks.
Hence the evolution of the Royal Nairobi Club and
so now
Karen and what have you.
Now we have a situation where Kilimani and Kileleshwa is densifying with lots of problems. But what is left as public spaces are schools. Yeah. All these schools.
And which are still very, very minimal because the number of public schools is, you can't count them on
But they are important.
Yes, they are.
Because, and that's the beauty, it's the thing that has saved that situation.
Actually, maybe not. Because the public schools are now being, they're morphing into churches over the weekends.
I know. What I'm trying to explain is the good thing is go try and get a change of use for a school.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is
you will not
well, hopefully.
No, that is the one thing at least we have
that
done.
You can be sure of.
There's a point where certain things were stolen from certain schools and all that.
Right.
But you will not get even these private members clubs.
Yes.
They can't get change of use. So it's also good.
There's been an attempt on Kiambu. On Limuru Golf Club.
And that's a very different thing.
Yes.
So I don't want to put thoughts into people's heads. But what I'm trying to say is but you see, that attempt was to make it into a public space. Not to make it private.
No.
We don't know we don't know what else might happen below.
It was to make it presumable.
In principle. In principle.
So what ostensibly
what I'm
into
saying
a public
is the
space.
one thing that has kind of locked and left what looks like parks is really the schools. And they end up doing a lot of things. You find Kilimani Primary School letting them out to a lot of
Yes, I know. Like the Kilimani Project Foundation does.
Yes.
Market, organic. Farmers market on a Sunday.
And so those are the last. Now, getting public spaces would mean buying private land.
Yes.
That's a whole different
ballgame together.
So what I'm trying to say is we have a difficult task that we need to tackle with very deep theoretical basis, and it cannot wait for the full LDP process if nobody is undertaking the LPDP process.
Yes.
So I find this is something where everybody is right. The people fighting against what, me included,
they're right.
You included, are right that this can't continue like this.
Yeah.
The people agitating, and I know them, for placemaking, they're right. The people agitating for really thinking about good mobility plans are right, for better infrastructure. The people saying the place should densify are also right. The trouble, and I and this is the part that we rightly have angst, is the same people saying it should be densified are also the people who should have both the power and the mandate to bring all these parties together. To figure this out and then begin to push it forward.
Are we in a Tower of Babel where we are all speaking different languages with probably the same end goal?
Not everybody.
Not everybody.
Yes, there's some
because
people,
there are other people who've got different
there's some
interests.
people who are still dreaming of, an idyllic, and this ideal does not. It just comes from what was happening here.
Right.
That, man, could I just have my 1 acre
and enjoy it as such.
And enjoy it
so
as
now,
such. But
having taken responsibility for our part as architects, maybe, loosely, in conclusion, what can we do? Because we must now be thinking, forward-looking, and looking for solutions. What can we do as architects to get out of this quagmire?
So
in the shortest, in the simplest way possible.
So we must, that fantastic corporate speak. What's your short term?
Yes.
Medium term.
Short term, medium term, and long term goals.
Plan. Yeah. By short term goals, we are saying the space we occupy is how do we begin to draw up urban design codes for density. And for density within these areas.
Do you think that the new building code that has just been passed into law addresses that?
I tried to look at it. I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's still at variance with the reality on the ground.
It's still at variance with the reality of the ground. And the other thing that I will say, you see, for the building code to be able to deal with an urban design code, this building code is countrywide.
Yes.
It can't.
Hence the LPDP.
Yes. But you see, the LPDPs don't have urban design codes.
They may not have urban design codes, but at least they have ordinances.
They have ordinances. But that's why I'm saying the architects, we need to push the space correctly.
Okay.
To begin to draw up true urban design codes. So I'll give you, and I know you said it conclusion, but I'll give you all these subdivisions. They are approved, aren't they?
For the most part.
For the most part. And subdivisions now have to be done by planners. So they're approved. So just like you have architects.
So do you think the architect needs to be central to the subdivision?
I don't believe
conversation?
I don't believe that there should be a subdivision
at all in the first place.
No. You see, subdivision was interesting. And the whole notion behind subdivision was that you have, if you're thinking about it from a growth perspective, is the most expensive land is serviced land.
Yes.
And the government and authorities, they are working with budgets. They have to, servicing land takes time.
Yes.
So you then say, okay, there's somebody somewhere with some land, they're ready to subdivide. Okay, fine. I'll give you an approval if you subdivide, so long as you put infrastructure. So you're then supporting the government in the provision of service.
Yes, of serviced land.
Of serviced land.
But in the process, absolving the government of its responsibility.
Not absolving. And that's why they approve. And you see, they're very clear. They approve with the proper requirements.
The caveats. Yes.
Not caveats. You have the proper, and this part, what I'm trying to say, they do this part well. What is not good is the actual plan.
Yes.
The laws behind the plan are good.
Yes.
So you'll be told very clearly, you have to, if this is what's going to happen, you have to have a 9-meter road.
Yeah.
If this is what's going to happen, you have to have a 12-meter road, 15-meter road, all those codes. And they'll tell you it's because that at one point you leave this thing to the government.
Yes.
To maintain.
Because at the end of the day,
all
land belongs to the government.
Yes. And once you do a subdivision and everybody gets their separate title,
yes,
that becomes public.
Oh, absolutely.
So what has happened in the past? People subdivided. Did they put an infrastructure?
No.
Yeah. Who is putting the infrastructure?
Nobody.
Government. No, you have to give them credit. They've done a lot of work around Tasia, around all those places, going back in
but
and putting.
It is work being done in retrospect.
In retrospect. But what I'm trying to tell you is that subdivision somebody made a lot of money.
Yes.
Because what did you do? You just subdivided land, then you make a lot of profit.
Yes.
No. You're supposed to subdivide land, calculate your cost of infrastructure, put that into the purchase plan of the land. And so they put it. But you go away with all the profit because you did not provide.
Absolutely. Yes, there's a part that you did not fulfill.
Yes. And in one of my previous jurisdictions, or other experiences, we actually worked where we did all that. We provided very expensive infrastructure. We did the hard work of providing the infrastructure. But then,
as per the law, as per,
yes, but then your competitors,
yes,
and not really your competitors, because there are other people who are not providing.
Yes.
Now, there are certain large developments, and I'm not patting their back for no reason, that are actually putting in their infrastructure. If you go to Tatu, if you go to Tilisi,
yes,
you'll actually see
they're putting in their infrastructure, but it is because they are going by with and along with a plan.
Yes. So what I'm trying to tell you is those others, subdivisions, did not
do their part.
And they were
so they want to plug into.
Yes. And remember, these are still controlled developments.
Yes.
Yet the government tells them, while you're controlled, we will still require you to put infrastructure of this quality.
Right.
Because who knows, 20, 30, 40, 50 years down the line,
future-proof.
It might revert back. You might decide, okay, let's just give everybody their separate titles.
And we move on.
So the government rightly requires you to do that.
Yes.
So where am I going to? Because this point started coming when I'm saying, what can architects do?
Yes. And I want you to wrap it up.
And me now I want to push, and I even want to say in planning, you should not have a subdivision if the final outcome cannot be seen. What do I mean? You know what the final outcome is.
Yes.
There should be a very clear modeling and design of the final outcome of that place.
So we are talking. We are back to the LPDP.
If we are architects, no, that's not the LPDP. That's what I'm trying to tell you. That can be done without. Because I'm talking about somebody subdividing 50 acres.
Yes.
Yeah. Because we do it. If we then understand, I've been trying to create little master plans for 50 by 100s.
Yes.
And saying, okay, what would it mean if I designed this thing, allowed these guys to build to the densities there? Yeah. Oops, sorry, this was my alarm. Yeah. So if we actually visualized,
yes,
you see many of those plans come, and it's just the plans.
Yes.
And they do everything right. Some things are then stolen off by people. They leave a certain percentage of land to for a park,
public spaces,
public use, blah blah blah,
for the development to breathe.
Yes. Then unfortunately, we have people who are also stealing those off.
Absolutely.
After the developers have. But what I was saying is, if I go and do a plan of 50 by 100s, and I fill the 50 by 100s and put a park off in one corner, and I put a large park, even if it's 10% of all that land.
Yes.
Is that more useful than having 10 parks within
10 smaller parks?
10 smaller parks.
It is more useful because I would say because then it is a shared.
It is
amenity.
Yes, and when you think about it, a 5-year-old needs to go to, well, they were saying 400 meters.
Yes.
400 meters was just the maximum.
Yes.
But if you think of a 5-year-old child, they want to go up. You want them to go to a park that's 10 meters away.
Yes.
And that would be a smaller park. But a teenager,
it may be a smaller park here, but 400, that's just shy of half a kilometer.
A teenager can
let the children walk.
A teenager can go a little further.
Yes. Yeah. But I also believe in allowing children to mobility.
So what I'm saying is those planning approvals, and when I've been doing subdivisions, not subdivisions, when I've been doing change of use, I tried to do one recently. The thing is even modeled and said, this is what I want to build. This is how I want to build it. And it goes in and they come back and say, as long as each unit sits within 0.35 of an acre. And I'm like, that's not important. Look at what I have done, because I still have the same number of units you're talking about. I have actually created a whole community. I have created more public space and reduced the actual land per unit. Look at it so that let's have a true planning conversation, not just a tick box and say this is what's allowed here.
It looks like we will have to carry on this conversation.
Yes, we'll have to carry on. As architects, we need to start publishing and speaking about these things and thinking about the other political end. I know you do that. Yeah. So I don't think I concluded well, but the conversation needs to continue. There's still so much.
There's a lot to this conversation, quite clearly, as you have,
Yeah, because in fact, the most critical thing, I must say this, is that notion of public space.
Yes.
Go look at the city, county office. If you walk, what's that? It's not Mamangina is the other one. Where the office?
This is in Nairobi?
Nairobi.
Yes.
KICC is on one side. The county
office is on the other side.
Yes. And of course, that there was a very clear urban design.
Absolutely.
About that whole place, including KICC was supposed to have given that as a truly public square, not fenced.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, county is fenced. And there's a very interesting little sign there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not brave enough to take a photo, and so I've looked at it in Google. But there's a little sign written no idling.
Mm-hmm.
And I always
as it is in most places in Nairobi.
I always ask myself,
yes,
where better for somebody to go if they have nothing to do than their city hall?
There's a lot of nothing being done in city hall anyway.
If city hall don't understand the notion of public space as a steward,
then we have a problem.
If all of us don't understand the notion of public space, even speaking about these public spaces we're going to create, forget that we have said 400 meters.
Absolutely.
Even speaking about them, we already have a philosophical problem, which is a totally different
conversation.
And it's a different conversation, which I wear a different hat.
Absolutely. So thank you very much, Arthur, for your very valuable insights.
I've enjoyed this.
So this has been The Lift, episode 4 by the Architects Alliance, where we speak about everyday issues on mainly about the built environment and other issues that affect the society. Thank you very much and have a good evening.
Thank you.